name's Tricia Drum-Lal. I'm 50 years old. I'm a physician assistant, and I was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy with my second child. Before I got pregnant, I was pretty healthy. I had a few rheumatological issues underlying, but very healthy, didn't have any heart issues that I was aware of, and was just a full-time working mom and wife and daughter, and just busy doing what I did. I was pregnant with my second child, my daughter. My first pregnancy was very uneventful, perfect, no problems. Second pregnancy had some more issues. Towards the end, I developed preeclampsia, and I ended up having to have a C-section at about 37 weeks because I was starting to develop high blood pressure, and I had some protein in my urine, which can be a problem. And so at 37 weeks, they said that we need to do a C-section. During that time of my C-section, a significant thing that happened was I was in the OR and feeling like I'm suddenly going to die. My blood pressure dropped to 60/40, and I was like, what is going on? Luckily, the anesthesiologist was smart enough to give me some pressors to bring my blood pressure back up, but that was kind of the first sign that something was wrong, but I didn't know at that point what that was. Lead me to coming home 4 weeks later, trying to live my life, do what I normally do, have a son who's 3, now a baby, feeling like more anxious, feeling a little more short of breath, not kind of sleeping great, having to sleep sitting up. And being the medical professional that I am, I'm a physician assistant. I worked in the ER for 20 years. I was starting to listen to my own lungs, taking care of myself, thinking I'm just anxious, I'm tired, there's nothing wrong with me, can continue to put it off. And then one day I was coming home from the store and I had groceries and I was huffing and puffing carrying groceries from my car into my house, and I had 2 steps. So one of my colleagues from the ER called me that day, and I was so breathless with talking. He was like, there's something wrong. Are you okay? And I was like, well, I'm probably anemic. I'm probably stressed. I might have a blood clot. I don't know. I'm not going to the ER. I work there. I don't need to go. And he was like, listen, there are rare occasions when women who've just had babies can have cardiomyopathy. And I was like, there's no way I have cardiomyopathy. I've worked 20 years, or 15, 16 years at the time, in the ER. I've never seen that happen, and there's no way I have it. And he was like, please go see somebody. So I actually decided to call my doctor. I didn't go to the ER. I called my primary care doctor, and I was like, I need to come in and be seen. Went and saw her. She did an x-ray and EKG and basically said, you have to go to the emergency room because it looks like you're in heart failure. And I was like, what? So we then proceeded to go to the hospital, and we went to the ER. And then one of the echo techs who I had worked with for many years was there, and he was doing my echocardiogram, and they're not supposed to say what they see. We won't tell who this was. No, but, and I was like, what's my ejection fraction? What is it? And he was looking at me like, I don't want to tell you. And I was like, what is it? And he was like, it's like 20 to 25, which is not good. Normal is 60 or above. And so I immediately went into panic. I, thought I'm not going to make this. I'm going to possibly die. And called my sister and was like, I need you to take care of my children if something happens to me. It was a pretty eye-opening moment. And then I was admitted to the hospital. I was up on the cardiac floor for the next week, and they were taking fluid off and giving me medication. That preceded the next 9 months of recovery, trying to, get into why this was going on and what was happening. And then took medications, saw my cardiologist and some other specialists. But it was pretty shocking. It was not what I expected. So I ended up, after about 9 months, I didn't work in the ER. I took some time off, recovered, didn't do a lot other than take medication. And at the time I was 41, and I was told by a lot of the cardiologists and people that I saw that, your heart can come back and go back to normal. It's not uncommon that you can, regain your full function. There are times it doesn't happen, but I was lucky that I ended up getting my full function back. So around 2016, end of that year, I stopped medication. And then from 2017 to 2019, I was fine. I was back to work, working full-time in the ER, 12-hour shifts, full-time, 2 young kids, daughter. I had some elderly parents that were kind of declining in their health. I was taking care of them. So in 2019, everything kind of came crashing down where, again, just busy, working, mom, daughter, and then one day I didn't feel well. And again, kind of busy life, trying to, do things, going on vacation, putting things off. And I just was, again, walking up some stairs, carrying some bags, and I was like, this is suddenly reminiscent. I'm suddenly short of breath. Why am I short of breath again? And of course, I called the ER and I spoke with the same doctor that I had spoken to, convinced me to go to the ER, 3 years earlier. And I was like, I just don't feel good. And I'm short of breath again. And he was like, you need to come in. And I'm like, I'm going on vacation tomorrow. I don't think I can come in. He's like, no, you need to come in. So again, I had been putting it off, and I basically went in to the ER. I had a new EKG finding at the time, which was like a right bundle branch block, which I hadn't had before. And then they repeated an echo. And again, this different echo tech, different one, kind of gave a preliminary report, which they do. It's not uncommon what they see, to the doctor. And then it was like, what's my ejection fraction? And this tech was like, oh, it looks good. Like, it's normal. I was like, great. So then the doctor called my cardiologist and, was like, well, she's going to go on vacation. Does it seem okay? It seems fine. Her EF is fine. She can go. The next day I went on a Disney cruise with my family and 2 other families, and I did not feel well, and I was short of breath again, and another episode where I just felt like I'm not going to make it. I don't know what's going on. And then 2 days later we get into port and my phone starts tinging, binging off the edge, and it's my cardiologist calling saying, you have to come home. Your ejection fraction is like 30 or 35. So I left my family on the cruise in Cabo. I came back home by myself, and then I ended up having a reoccurrence of cardiomyopathy. So then proceeded in a 2-year journey of, going to see other cardiologists. Ended up coming and meeting Nicole Weinberg to be my new cardiologist, because she's the best cardiologist there is. And so anyway, and then from there I ended up doing some cardiac rehab. So I did that. I did physical rehab, and then I didn't come back as quickly as I did the first time. I was on medications. My blood pressure was dropping constantly. I was lightheaded. I was dizzy. I didn't feel well, and I had all these other, extreme circumstances in my life happening at the time. I just kept putting off dealing with myself because I was dealing with everybody else. There was a lot of pressure for me to go back to work for my job and get back into the ER. And I was really having a struggle with, of course I have to work. I can't not work. I have my insurance through them. I need to go back to work. And then right a week before I was supposed to go back, I was picking my kids up from school, and I had an event where my heart rate went up into the 160s, 190s. I almost passed out. They had to bring me from the school where I was picking my children up, where I thought I'm going to pass away and drop dead on my kids' schoolyard. They took me from an ambulance to the hospital. I was readmitted and then stabilized. And then at that point, my cardiologist at the time came in and was like, you need to just let it go and stop worrying about your job and stop worrying about your insurance and stop worrying about everything. You need to focus on yourself, because the 6 months prior of my reoccurrence, I was dealing with everything else, and my parents and my kids. And she's like, you just got to let it go. And so at that moment, I was like, okay, you're right. And I finally let it go. And I actually walked away and started to focus on myself. And then that's when I actually started the cardiac rehab, and started to really deal with myself and do what I needed to do. And then after another probably 6 months of that, my ejection fraction still was in the low 30s. And I was having bouts where, again, I just wasn't feeling well. And then I was terrified, and I thought, I'm going to die. Like, I could drop dead of an arrhythmia, and I have 2 young kids. And so that's when Nicole Weinberg was like, let's have you see somebody, Dr. Vanderzee, who's also amazing, and let's see if you qualify for a defibrillator. And so at that time, it was like, if it was something that could give me any kind of a life-saving option, I wanted to do it. So in last year or 2 years ago, I ended up having a defibrillator put in. And since then my heart rate, my ejection fraction came back up, and I feel like things have gotten stabilized with my medications, and then things have gotten kind of back to baseline. And then now I went into a different form of medicine. I now work with Ernie Prudente at Westside Internal Medicine in kind of a day job and less stress, and I couldn't be happier. So things are better now. One piece of advice that I would give to any young woman who sees themselves having a child down the line would be, for me, I ended up, when I was 39 or 40, I ended up going to a cardiologist just to get like a baseline, synopsis of myself. I actually was having a little bit of some stress and wasn't really sure if it was heart related. So I thought, I'm going to be 40. I'm just going to go see a cardiologist and get a baseline. And that was probably one of the best things I did, because the cardiologist at the time did an EKG, an echocardiogram, and had all of my baseline with what was normal for me. And so when it came time, and a year or 2 years later, when I was in the ER and my ejection fraction was 20-25, they could look back, to 2 years prior and see that my normal ejection fraction is normally 60. So I think it's really helpful. And, again, as women and as any, patient, they don't go see a cardiologist until they're having a problem, or they're, older, or they're having chest pain and something's not right. I just feel for myself, and again, it's not always medically indicated for everyone, but I think if you think you're going to have a child, and there is a risk of any kind of heart issue, have a baseline cardiology exam beforehand. That could be very helpful. Since I was little, I wanted to go into medicine, and I was a little girl, and my dream was to take care of people. That dream came true, and I was a caretaker, and then I wanted to have a family. So the whole picture of, living the dream, having it all, I had, and it was amazing. But again, as a caretaker and as a medical professional, we tend to forget and we don't take care of ourselves. So that was the biggest lesson for me, was that I had to learn to take care of myself and put myself first, because I now had children of my own that had their own dreams, that were going to live that dream and fulfill that. And I wanted to be there to see it and to be part of it. And so that means I had to take care of myself.